with Joey Bart showing improvement, Blake Sable doing things like hitting heroic walk-off home runs, Gary Sánchez having an opt-out in just a few days, and now Patrick Bailey promoted to AAA. Is there a scenario where like three of those guys are on the roster? Because it's hard to see how there's suddenly not enough room for all the catchers the Giants have. So we'll get to that question and many more next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thanks for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts, including YouTube, so check us out there if you have not already, and please hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And coming up on today's show, we're going to get to some mailbag questions. The first one is a little bit of what we discussed yesterday, but it's more specific, coming from Thomas, who says, I need 30 minutes on Patrick Bailey, Sable, and Bart fitting on the big league squad. Sable, more outfield. So I'm not going to give you 30 minutes, hopefully more like 3 or 4. And it is just, I mean, you mentioned those three and not even Gary Sánchez, right? And so that's how tight things have become. And as I said yesterday, to me, with the promotion of Patrick Bailey to AAA, I didn't even mention in the open just now that it was not Gary Sánchez, but Ricardo Genoves, who was on taxi squad when they thought Joey Bart might have to go on the IL. But just to get straight to your question, is there a way to fit Blake Sable, Joey Bart, and Patrick Bailey on the same team? I don't think so. I just don't really see how they would do that, because it would be 3 catchers and like you said, Sable more outfield, but you've got your outfield. You've got Mitch Haniger, who has not yet started against a righty, but I fully anticipate as he kind of eases back in, he's going to just be an everyday player unless something's wrong with him physically. And then you've got Michael Conforto, who has not had the best start. He has hit some big homers, but has not performed great. But he's just, first of all, he's left-handed, so is Blake Sable. So it's not like, okay, well, you could possibly platoon there. And he's not going to platoon with Haniger because, like I said, Haniger is not going to be a platoon player. And then your one platoon situation is Mike Yastrzemski and Austin Slater. And both of those guys, I mean, Slater, it's only been a couple of games, but Slater's been one of the best hitters in baseball against right-handed pitching for a long time. And again, he's right-handed, Sable's left-handed, so that it wouldn't even be taking Slater's spot. It would be taking Yastrzemski's spot. And for a number of reasons, that doesn't make sense either, because Yastrzemski against a right-handed pitcher is their clear best center field option when we're talking Haniger, Yastrzemski, and Conforto. Yaz is like the center fielder in that case. And so I don't really see room for him there. And then you talk about, okay, well, maybe the 5th outfielder. But that's not really how the Giants have built their team. They don't, like, the traditional way a team was built, and particularly the Giants and just most teams in general, is that they had their like starting 8 in the National League, and then the pitcher in the lineup, of course. And then they had bench players who were just guys who played only when your normal guys needed a day off. But that is not how the current Giants operate at all. It's the kind of line change. They, like I said, you cannot platoon at every position. They've got currently 4 guys on their bench. So up to 4 guys in their starting lineup, 4 out of 9, so less than half, can be kind of platooned throughout the course of the game. And You've got one with Wade at first, and the platoon partner being basically Wilmer Flores, and you've got Jock Peterson with the platoon partner being. It's kind of weird because David VR has struggled, and JD Davis has kind of taken over the everyday third base job. And then you've got Slater on the bench against a right-handed pitcher. David VR could be in trouble, but I just don't see. You would need to replace him with an infielder, in my opinion. And so it's tough to see how it happens. And so the fact that Bailey is in AAA, something's got to give or nothing will change, and you'll just have Bailey in AAA. I'm very interested about the Gary Sánchez opt-out coming up on Monday. Right now, I just don't see a way that he makes it onto the team because it would probably just simply mean they'd have to give up on Sable. And, I just tweeted this out earlier today. Sable has just some of the weirdest kind of collection of numbers you'll ever see. I was stunned to see that his contact rate on pitches out of the strike zone. So when he swings and the ball is not in the strike zone, it is the lowest in baseball by almost 2 times. Like his contact rate on pitches out of the zone when he swings is 12.9%. The next closest player is at 24%. So it's almost twice as low as the next closest player. And just overall, Blake Sable's contact rate of 55.9%. When he swings, how often does he touch the baseball? 55.9% of the time. And overall strikeout rate, when he comes up to bat, how often does he strike out? 45% of the time. Those are both the worst marks in Major League Baseball. And yet, when he's managed to put the ball in play, which, again, he's done at a lower rate than literally anybody in baseball, minimum 60 plate appearances, he has done well. He's hit for power, and he's 214 isolated power, 360 average on balls in play, and overall a league average offensive line. And so Sable, there's some really good and there's some really bad, and then there's he's been a good framer, but there's the catcher's interference. And so I'm just not sure they're ready to give up on Blake Sable. And you might think I'd be even crazy to mention it, but there's just, like I said, some extreme bad and some extreme, I wouldn't say extreme good, but interesting, and not ready to just turn the page just for Gary Sánchez, who's struggling in AAA. And so I think maybe Sánchez leaves and then Bailey's that kind of option. And if Sable over the course of time kind of can't keep it going, or if Joey Bart over the course of time can't keep it going, then maybe that's how Bailey becomes an option. But I can't see the three of them all being on the roster at the same time, I guess, unless there's an injury. Like if Mitch Haniger were to go down, remember Sable was starting in left field for much of the beginning of the season. And so that could create an opportunity. But if the outfielders are healthy, then I just can't see Bart, Sable, and Bailey in the major leagues all at the same time. So I did take a little bit longer than I intended to answer that question, but it's so interesting and requires a lot of, thoroughness. So coming up in just a minute, we're going to get to a couple of fun questions. Who is my favorite current Giant and who is my favorite Giant of all time? We'll get to that and so much more in just a minute. But before we do, this episode is brought to you by Game Time. Buying tickets to your favorite event, whether it's the Giants or anything else, theater, a concert, shouldn't be stressful. And for me, it is, especially if I'm going to a new venue and I don't know what the view from the seat is going to be, for example. And especially I really want to get the best price and I'm not sure that I'm able to do so. But with Game Time, these are taken care of. You get images of the seat and you get the lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, etc. And about the lowest price guarantee, you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, here we go. We're going to get to more questions and answers. I want to get to this one about who is my favorite current Giant and who is my favorite Giant of all time. Thanks for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers, on Monday, we're going to be recapping, how about this, the Giants playing a 2-game series against a very interesting and underperforming yet star-studded Padres team in Mexico. That's right, Giants playing in Mexico, Mexico City over the weekend. And that game tomorrow's game is at 3:05 Pacific, and you can catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Giants. So yes, the next question comes from Bay Area Champ, who says, who is your current favorite Giant and who are your favorite players from around the league? So current favorite Giant, it's like, of course I thought about this before, but it's hard because I like a lot of them. But I think that the answer for me is probably a pretty clear Thairo Estrada. If you listen to the show a lot, I've been optimistic for a while now about Thairo Estrada just continuing to improve. His physicality has improved to the point where, he has the potential to be like a borderline star level player, in my opinion. He's got to work on cutting down on some of the chase. Sometimes I think he just feels like he can hit anything, and so he starts chasing. Like, to start the season, he was being really disciplined and was just like kind of a monster all around. And then I feel like he started chasing a little bit because he was doing so well with the bat. He felt like, I can get my bat to anything. But if he can just hone in the plate discipline a little bit there and just be like especially selective, he's got legitimate power. He's got legitimate speed. He's young. I really like his attitude. If you've ever checked out like YouTube videos that the Giants put out, like a day in the life of Thairo Estrada, he's just a like happy guy who also just has this desire to be great and to improve. And he's under team control for 4 seasons, counting this one. I think he just turned 27. So I just like everything about Thairo Estrada and the versatility, and I think he gets slept on. I mentioned this the other day. I feel like right now, I don't want to say at minimum, but he looks like an all-star caliber player right now to me. And he might not become an all-star because, people sleep on West Coast teams and players on the West Coast having breakouts. I'm not saying he's going to be an all-star, but he's, to me, like, I think that the play is all-star caliber. And there's potential for even more than that. If he could really just kind of, when you see him hit home runs, it's not like these are wall scrapers. Like, he has the potential to really get a hold of a ball and just drive it to the pull side. And he also has the potential to kind of make a lot of contact and hit the ball to right field. Just kind of an all-around good player. And he runs well. I think I already said that. But a lot of steals. Definitely could be a 20-homer, 20-steal guy this year. Okay, so moving on. Favorite players around the league. I like other players who remind me of Thairo Estrada. It's kind of funny. Like, some of the guys I go to are Jose Ramirez on the Cleveland Guardians and Andres Jimenez on the Cleveland Guardians. And I just mentioned them the other day as players I kind of comped in a way in terms of them breaking out when people didn't really see it coming. I like players who have a good attitude. There's a lot of players on the Tampa Bay Rays who they just kind of are, it's like they're confident, but they're also not cocky, and they're also good. I mean, I need to pull up the Rays roster just to remind myself exactly who I'm thinking of. Like, Yandy Diaz is fun. Randy Arozarena is fun. Like, right, he's a very confident guy, but he also has fun playing the game. Wander Franco, a lot of fun. So those are just some of my guys. I like a ton of players, but those are the guys I'll mention for now. Logan Webb is also one of my favorites, but I went with Estrada. And then the next question from Dylan, who says, who is your personal favorite Giant of all time? So that's a tough one. And I mean, the guys who come to mind, my first favorite player when I was a kid was Marvin Bernard. I honestly couldn't even tell you how good he was or not. I know, like, I've looked up his numbers since, and, I believe he was somewhat good at times, but he wasn't like a star player or whatever. But for whatever reason, I just loved Marvin Bernard when I was a kid growing up and starting to get into the Giants. And so I wouldn't say he's my favorite Giant of all time. That probably falls into the, of course there's Barry Bonds, but definitely the best player of all time that I've seen play is Barry Bonds. But of course he was kind of grouchy sometimes, and certainly nationally people didn't care for him. I obviously like him quite a bit, but it might be Tim Lincecum, I think, because just how he was just so fun and so electric and so different in his personality, and just kind of, at his peak, Tim Lincecum was just like one of the most fun players ever. Posey is so hard. It's so hard not to say him, but the like quote unquote drawbacks is that he was kind of a little bit, I don't want to say boring, but he didn't have the same kind of fun personality of a Tim Lincecum. So I'll probably go with Lincecum. I loved Sandoval kind of before he became everybody's favorite. Like I just, when he was a like young player, he was my favorite for a while. So anyway, I've liked a lot of Giants over the years, but those are the answers that I'll go with for now. Certified Freddie Freeman hater, which is a name I love for whatever reason, because he's a Dodger is why, asks, what does a successful season look like for Yaz and Slater? So I think we're looking at it right now. So far, a successful season for Yastrzemski is one in which he gets back to being more like what he was. I don't want to say in the 60-game season when he received MVP votes, but even just his first season in the major leagues, when he's someone who's more like 20% above average offensively versus roughly league average offensively, which is what he's been the last couple of years. And so for Yaz, it kind of comes down to, what does it come down to really? It comes down to, just look at the last 2 years. 2021, even, people say everything went right in 2021. Yaz had a down year in 2021. So that's just Tommy La Stella was not good in 2021. That just ticks me off. Not everything went right. But in those 2 years combined, honestly, this is one of those cases where I'll say batting average is a big part of it for him. His batting average in 21 and 22 combined was 219. He still managed to be, by a more advanced metric, actually a little bit above average offensively, despite a 219 average over that span, thanks to a 308 on base, which was decent, and a 424 slugging, so hitting for above average power. But if he can just and it kind of comes down to batting average on balls in play. For him during those 2 years, it was just 258. And in his career, it's 291. And so if that number, and by the way, in his first season, that number was 325. In his second season, it was 370. So his career batting average on balls in play is 291. So if he could simply do kind of what he did in 2021 and 2022, but raise that batting average on balls in play up about 30 points, that would simply raise like everything in his slash line up about 30 points. So instead of hitting 220, you're hitting 250. Instead of a 308 on base, it's a 338 on base. And so far we're seeing that. He's been really disciplined. I think not chasing is a big thing for him, and just making better contact. And I think we all know what Yaz looks like at his best, and it just looks like more of that and less of the struggles when he's swinging at high pitches that he can't get to, swinging and missing, and then maybe chasing below the zone. So a disciplined Yaz, an on-time Yaz, a healthy Yaz, and just someone who gets more hits when he puts the ball in play, essentially. Also, fewer pop-outs. I'm pretty sure pop-outs have been a problem for him. And for Slater, he's just a platoon player who really hits left-handed pitching, and he's one of those high probability guys. Like I feel like he consistently has good seasons, and what he does is he starts against lefties and just he's basically 2021 was actually the 1 year under this new regime when he totally underwent some swing changes and became like a power hitter and a launch angle guy. 2021 was the worst year by far since 2020. And so again, another example of not everything going right in 2021. He was much better in 2022. So I expect more of the same. He gets on base a lot. He doesn't chase. He walks, and he just does damage against lefties. And so and then he had some weird defensive issues last year. So Yaz and Slater, part of it too is just continuing to be good defensively and not kind of having weird regression defensively, despite them being athletic players. So coming up in just a minute, more questions and answers. We're going to get to how much longer does Farhan Zaidi have to develop a homegrown all-star? Because people are waiting on that. They've been waiting on it for a long time. So before we get into that, I want to tell you about my new favorite game, Ultimate Baseball GM. If you ever dreamed like me of becoming a major league general manager, obviously most of us, it's not actually going to happen. I hate to break it to you. If it's your dream, hey, maybe it will. But if you just want that experience without the stress and you just get to play a game, Ultimate Baseball GM is for you. It certainly has been for me. You get to do everything a major league general manager gets to do. Hiring the right coaches and staff, managing team finances, scouting and drafting players, managing through difficult personalities and injuries, navigating your franchise through free agency and all of the ups and downs of a season. Game is fantastic, and Locked On Giants listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo Locked On in the game store, so make sure to check it out. To download the game, just visit probaseballgm.com, scan the code, or look it up on the app stores. That's probaseballgm.com, Ultimate Baseball GM. Start your dynasty today. All right, here we go. We're going to get to some more questions and answers. Just a reminder that the everydayers are going to hear us talking about the Giants playing the super interesting Padres, who are honestly, their run differential is worse than the Giants. They're under 500. I think one game under 500. They got Tatis back. That lineup is kind of insane, and yet, like, the Giants have been a much better offensive team so far than the Padres, believe it or not, with Soto and Machado and Bogarts and now Tatis. It's kind of crazy, but that's how it's been. The game is in Mexico City, where the altitude is much higher than even Coors Field. So it could be just a offensive environment like no other. I don't really know what to expect, but you can catch every pitch of the hometown broadcast for the Giants with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Giants. So the next question comes from Nicholas Bosa, who says, how long does Farhan Zaidi get to develop an all-star that comes through his farm system? When would you wave the white flag? 2024, 2025, 2030? So I always assume and hope that these questions are in jest, when people start mentioning like 2030. I've heard people say like Giants are going to be rebuilding for 15 years. It's just crazy. And so 2030, I mean, but I get your point. That wasn't what you're saying here about how long does he get to develop develop an all-star that comes through his farm system. So to me, I'll answer the question, but what did I just say about Tyler Estrada? And so guys like that kind of count to me, because no, he wasn't drafted and developed by the Giants, but they traded for him. And if he becomes that kind of player that I think he can become, and so far has been this year, then why doesn't that count? You should get credit for that just the same. And also JD Davis. I mean, that trade is just looking ridiculously one-sided in the Giants' favor, with JD Davis looking like he should be in the lineup every single day right now and playing suddenly great defense, even though he's known as not a good defender, and hitting. And that was a trade. Mike Yastrzemski, I know he's not perfect, and like I said, the last 2 years were kind of a struggle, but this year so far has been good. And the first couple years of his career were good. And so overall, Yastrzemski's just been at worst like just a solid major leaguer, and at best more than that. That was a trade in which they gave up barely nothing at all. And LaMonte Wade Jr., they gave up Sean Anderson, who's now pitching in Asia, I think. And Wade has been really good. So I don't think it's all about developing, but it is important. I'm not going to just act like that also doesn't matter. And if they legitimately don't develop an all-star until 2030, then yeah, that's probably a problem. But I also want to point out, not only have all those minor trades paid huge dividends that I just mentioned, but also a lot of the free agent signings that they've made have been smashing successes, like Carlos Rodon and Kevin Gausman, Tony DeSclafani. I get it, the 1 year, but the first year was great. The second year was injury plagued and short. And now this year he's been good. Alex Wood, had a rough year, but the first year was good. And Camilo Doval, I guess they didn't draft him. So I don't really think that's how they're judging Farhan Zaidi. And in particular, he's not in charge. He's not the one doing the scouting and ultimately making the picks by himself on who they draft. And so it doesn't necessarily even reflect on him about this question. But he is ultimately in charge of putting the people in place to make those decisions. And just generally speaking, just to speak to development a little bit, the Giants have done a well above average job at developing players, it hasn't really come from within yet, but it does take a while because they took over 5 years ago. And when you draft guys, it can take 5 years for that line to start coming through. And I think we're close to it with the likes of Kyle Harrison and Casey Schmidt and Patrick Bailey now in AAA. And so, again, I don't see it that way. It's like if all these other things are going well, and yet technically none of these guys are all-stars by 2024, then you fire him. That's just too black and white. It's more nuanced than that. But yeah, I mean, you would hope that they start to have some success from the players they actually draft and develop themselves, which the fact that they've been able to target free agents well and target, players in trades well would seem to bode well for their chances of hitting on somebody. And Marco Luciano dealing with an injury right now. Well, I guess he actually wasn't. He was a international signing by the previous regime, to be clear. But, Harrison and Schmidt are right there. Patrick Bailey's right there. So we'll see, but that's not how I would frame it. Anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen today. Everydayers are going to hear about a 2-game Mexico City series that's just so interesting with the struggling Padres and high altitude in first regular season baseball games ever in Mexico City, I believe. So they play the Padres tomorrow at 3:05 Pacific. Catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Giants. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a lot. So thank you in advance, and thanks to everyone who's done so already. Can't wait to be with you again on Monday, recapping Mexico City. So thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.